Welcome to the Belly Button Window channel and episode 14 of the Jimi Hendrix story, like you've never heard it before. In this episode, we examine September 1967, including the various gigs, recording sessions, concerts, and the critical events for that month. Please remember to check the channel's community tab and video information page, where you will find links to related videos, performances, and stunning photographs from the period. Throughout September of 1967, the Jimi Hendrix Experience maintained a steady touring schedule, all the while knowing that the second LP, Axis Bold as Love, was due to be delivered by November of that year. They played in West Germany, as it was called then, followed by Sweden, including two 8,000-ticket sellout shows before returning to England. This was the group's second visit to Sweden, and Hendrix, by his own account, had a fondness for the place. As we shall see, over the course of the month, the band did 15 performances at 11 different venues. Many, but not all, of the concerts were documented, and in a few instances, film and audio believed to have been destroyed has recently resurfaced. Mitch said it best with the following observation of this period. "We were still doing the odd club gig, which was strange after Monterey and the Hollywood Bowl. We were really honoring old commitments, which every newly successful act had to go through." And Mitch was totally correct. For example, the Beatles, when they were number one, still had a contract for something stupid like £60, which they were required to fulfill. Friday, September 1st, Are You Experienced is released in the US by Warner Reprise, with slightly different tracks to the UK version. The main obligation for the band was a press reception with Manfred Mann and Dave D, as was noted by Noel Redding in his diary, while later in the day, Jimmy, Noel and Mitch visit Checkpoint Charlie, the famous crossing point, which at the time separated East and West Berlin. That evening, Jimmy is invited to the 21st birthday party of Barry Gibb from the Bee Gees, along with other guests who included Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick and Teak, which was held at the Hotel Arosa, Berlin. September 2nd, ZDF TV Studios, Berlin, recording for various TV shows, 4, 3, 2, 1, and Hot and Sweet, which were broadcast a few days later. The invitation for the Jimi Hendrix Experience to appear was intended to coincide with West Germany's unveiling of color television. Jerry Stickles recalled, "The fact that it was lip-sync rather than live allowed the group to have some fun. The group went through the motions of performing Can You See Me and Burning of the Midnight Lamp. Traffic was on the show too, and everybody was swapping around in the bands because the German producers wouldn't know better." Noel Redding had noted in his diary that Small Faces and Bee Gees also appeared. Alexei Kubica was with his aunt, Gitta Kubica, at the TV recordings and recalled, "I was about 13 years old. With my Aunt Gitta, a pretty crazy chick, I visited the IFA in Berlin. From there, all broadcasts of television were sent during the period of the IFA exhibition. There were still no private broadcasters, and the entertainment program was quite manageable. I do not know what music show I visited with Auntie. It was probably Beat Club or 4321 Hot and Sweet, or something like that. Guests included Dave D and Company, the Spencer Davis Group, and Steve Winwood, I believe. The program also had Jimi Hendrix as a guest, but that did not interest me, particularly being a 13-year-old at the time, but I remember that, although he played only one song, an immense fascination came over me. After the show, you could only chat with Steve Winwood in the transmission studio at the bottom of the stage and get autographs. Jimmy was gone immediately after his brief appearance and was seen no more. Upon leaving the studio, my aunt discovered a side door where there was quite a bustle going on. It woke the hunting instinct, that of the autograph hunter in her. Here was something going on. At that time, my aunt was in her 30 years and had a rather businesslike and confident appearance, and so she had no difficulty getting past the security people. That already existed even then. Then it was a steep staircase leading upstairs. There he sat, Jimi Hendrix, in a backstage room behind a large pane of glass at a table full of glasses and bottles, fag in mouth, surrounded by seemingly important people in the music industry. In addition, there were also large blondes. Later I learned that they had to be what are called groupies. As I recall now, Jimmy seemed somehow out of place. Hendrix scribbled autographs on pieces of paper and cards that were handed to him by helpers. So my aunt grabbed the security guard who Jimmy was closest to and asked for an autograph. As a keen autograph hunter, She always had a piece of paper she had always ready, just in case. My aunt then dragged me behind the security guard through the door frame, and so I stood right next to Jimi Hendrix. My aunt pulled out her camera, which she carried along with her pad and pen, and took a picture of Jimi Hendrix as he was writing my autograph. September 3rd, Konserthallen LISEBERG, Gothenburg, Sweden, 2 shows. The following is a review of the concerts which appeared in the newspaper, Gothenburg's Tidings, with the headline, Guitar Circus with Technical Problems by Gösta HANSSON. The technical difficulties were huge yesterday when Jimi Hendrix and his Experience held court for the Gothenburg fans at Liseberg's Konserthallen. Both the song and guitar amplifiers collapsed, and Jimi ended the first show by kicking down the faulty amps to the floor. Before that, Jimi explained that he thought it was embarrassing to perform with such muddled equipment. 2 sold-out shows and intense applause showed that Jimi Hendrix is a popular guitar player. In spite of the technical failures, Jimi got the opportunity to demonstrate his outstanding talent to handle the guitar. He nearly surpassed himself in bringing forth sounds with it. Sometimes he himself seemed surprised by the results. There was this time more guitar circus than musical experience. Playing the strings with hands and teeth were more brief this time. His main act now is lying on the floor during Purple Haze. The rest of the repertoire consisted of, among other numbers, The Wind Cries Mary, Foxy Lady, Rock Me Baby, and Let Me Stand Next to Your Fire. Drummer Mitch Mitchell got the opportunity to demonstrate his great talents in hammering the drums when Jimi's vocal amplifier broke down. It is understandable that Jimi was not particularly inspired during such a performance as yesterday. While another publication's review headlined, Sexy Jimi attracted a huge audience in Gothenburg by Margareta Klingberg. Jimi Hendrix, now a little sexier in his reputation, is on an arena stage again. It was in Liseberg that they drew 26,000 for him at the concert hall. With wild glee, he, Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell also ran the show as Americans. The Gothenburg public was in any case receptive to his influence. Yesterday he wore a floral jacket embroidered with small pieces of mirror and covered with sparkling amulets. At one point, without playing the strings, he was making strange sounds, tapping the guitar neck and hovering his hands over the edges of the instrument. He is certainly the most magical stage figure in pop at the moment. September 4th saw the group arriving in Stockholm for 4 days. Mitch Mitchell recalled the band's arrival in Sweden as follows. I think it was in Stockholm that we turned up to the hotel and there's a red carpet laid out. People were giving us a lot of help to carry our baggage in. We thought, hey, this is great, thinking it was meant for us. In fact, they were trying to get rid of us because Princess Alexandra and her husband were coming in and we were holding them up. Later, the group performed 2 shows at the Gröna Lund, Tivoli Gardens, the first at 1 p.m. and the second at 10 p.m. September 5th, live performances for Swedish radio and television. The Jimi Hendrix Experience appear live at Studio 4, Radio Huset, Stockholm for Sveriges Radio. They perform a full concert performance in front of a live audience for the Swedish radio show Sveriges Pop 67 Special and are interviewed by Claes Berling. Songs performed, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Hey Joe, I Don't Live Today, The Wind Cries Mary, Foxy Lady, Fire, Burning of the Midnight Lamp, and Purple Haze. Additionally, Hendrix is interviewed by Leif Anderson, broadcast the next day on Pop 67 Amerikalisten program. Noel reckoned that the recordings were bootlegged several times over the years. September 6th, Idrottshol, VASTERAS, Sweden, 2 shows. With the support acts Mersey-sekt, AB Music, DJs and Outsiders. In an interview, when asked if they play pop music, Hendrix replied that, it's not really pop, but if someone says that it's rhythm and blues with roots in both pop and jazz, it will undoubtedly be as close as possible to what we do. September 7th, Club Philips, Stockholm. Jimi Hendrix jams with HANSSON and CARLSSON, plus visiting the Entill Club in Stockholm. Photos from the jams show Jimi playing bass guitar and participating in a jam session with the members of the Swedish group Mäki Mark Men. Others involved in what has become known as the HANSSON and CARLSSON jam included Bo Hansson, organ, Janne Carlsson, drums, George Clemens, drums, Jimi Hendrix, bass guitar, and George Wedenius from Blood, Sweat and Tears, and they performed the original version of Tax Free. When interviewed later, George Clemens, aka King George, had this recollection of the jam. We had a place in Stockholm called Club Phillips. I played drums there. There was a jazz drummer, but he didn't want to play with Jimmy all the time. He is a quite famous Swedish jazz drummer nowadays, called Hooch or something. But anyway, he left the drums, so I went up and played with them. I'm good for 2 songs. Jimmy also played with the organ player HANSSON, yeah. HANSSON recorded this on tape. He still has it, but he won't give it up. I got tired of asking him about it. He kept telling me, I got the tape, and I kept saying, give it to me, but he never gave me nothing. So now I just don't ask him. Jimmy had Mitch come down. The bass player was antisocial. One of the other guys that came with Jimmy, he is a TV star in Sweden now. That's CARLSSON. He got his own TV show in Sweden now. According to the account from a person who was also in attendance, this is what happened later. A special highlight in Philip's club story was, of course, that Jimi Hendrix jammed there, together with HANSSON and CARLSSON and Bill Åström. Hendrix had come without his band, and he slept at Bill's home. One day he and Hendrix were out in the old town on their way to a party, but they ended at the wrong place. According to Bill, I thought I knew about where this party was happening. We, Jimmy and me, got up to the gate, and so we heard someone laughs. We knock on door, and it turned out that there were 2 couples who had such a true Swedish party and sang Ole Adolphson songs. So we got it really wrong. It was definitely not the party we were supposed to be going to. But yes, a guitar was still there, and it was a right-handed guitar, but Jimmy could play right-handed as well. So then, we just settled in. They thought, of course, that we were exciting, that we were unlikely. Of course, it is an unforgettable memory, and not especially because Jimmy became the icon he did, but because it was so good. He was genius and mastered this old acoustic blues as well. September 8th, while still in Stockholm, the Experience did recordings for Swedish television, which were broadcast September 10th, performing Hey Joe, Foxy Lady, Purple Haze, The Wind Cries Mary, and I Don't Live Today. They were then booked for 2 shows at Popladen, HOGBO Brook, in HOGBO. In the first show, they performed in front of a sparse audience, only around 100 people, causing Jimmy to say that it doesn't matter if the audience is small. I play because I like to play the guitar, and I avoid looking at my audience. Here we have a HOGBO concert review, which appeared in the local press by someone named Floor, which featured the headline, "The audience let HOGBO down, 1,300 at Hendrix Gala." A much press-covered tour with the Monkees in the USA, and more than 25,000 saw their last performance in Sweden. It's what Jimi Hendrix is all about. At Friday evening, just over 100 cold youth saw their first show, while 1,200 visitors were counted at the second show in HOGBO. In other words, almost a fiasco. A contrast for a band belonging in the absolute top in the world of pop. It doesn't matter if the audience is small, Jimmy said. I play because of the guitar playing itself. I avoid looking at my audience. This is true. There were few times when Jimmy looked at the audience. He's totally sunken into his guitar playing. Jimmy follows every note with his whole body. The guitar sweeps around his body, and at the same time he manages to move in a way that makes you understand why associations of mothers react. That Jimmy apparently lives with his guitar, he demonstrates by being able to swing the guitar, have it behind his back while still being able to play exactly as on record. Jimmy also did his well-reported guitar playing with his teeth, where he gets much help by the amplifiers being turned up loudly. The drummer Mitch Mitchell and bass player Noel Redding have a rich force in the rhythm section. The drummer showed an example of great rhythm feeling. An individual rendition of Like a Rolling Stone belonged to the better songs, as well as Foxy Lady, which Jimmy introduced by grinding his guitar against the mic stand. Dramatic Jimi Hendrix in HOGBO's Cold Pop Show by Lars Lundgren. It was cold in Sweden yesterday evening, so cold that we felt sorry for all of us as we waited for Jimi Hendrix during the pop show in HOGBO. The first warm-up band, Midnighters, did not make any of the 300 of us any warmer, and they are not much to write about. It became a little better when Halifax team from Skutska took the stage. Saxophone and flute playing and an American repertoire made the evening chill reduce half a degree. The last warm-up band, the Outsiders from Stockholm, played, and they did it really well. Even if the Outsiders playing is influenced completely by Jimi Hendrix, they dare show some personality on stage, which is more than one can say about many Swedish groups. Jimi Hendrix has a stage style, which, without the lightest hesitation, is dramatical. While he is bouncing around in front of his amplifier and sometimes gets into intensive fighting with his microphone, he makes sounds on his guitar with his fingers, palms and his teeth. His appearance with his terrified hairstyle and the garish colors of his stage clothes do a lot to fascinate his audience. The Jimi Hendrix Experience play loud, very loud, and since the pop barn in HOGBO totally lacks acoustics, the music was often reduced to noises. From the very first moment it was clear that Noel Redding plays a tight and good bass guitar, and that Mitch Mitchell's aggressive drum playing melts together with the style of the group. And it is of course a pleasure that such a genius guitarist, as Jimi Hendrix is classified, under popular music. His music is hot and catching, and one always notices the genuine blues feeling that is behind it. The HOGBO audience seemed to be skeptical and adopted a wait-and-see policy to the phenomenon of Jimi Hendrix, but no one could stay untouched by the passionate music that the group plays, and when everything was over, we all had warmed up ears. September 9th, Mariberg Skogen, KARLSTAAD, Sweden. The day comprised an interview and 2 shows, the first at 8 p.m., and which featured the following songs: Foxy Lady, Fire, The Burning of the Midnight Lamp, while the second show at 10 p.m. featured Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, The Burning of the Midnight Lamp and Wild Thing. The following is a concert review by Dag titled, No Success for Jimi Hendrix, Despite 8,000 Paying Viewers, in Skogen. The previous time he performed in Mariberg Skogen, he and his Experience drew approximately 3,500 spectators, this time almost 8,000. Not everyone was able to get tickets for seats to be able to see Sexy Jimmy, but all 8,000 could hear him. Rarely have so few been responsible for so much noise. But something was missing to make the evening complete. Maybe it was the audience. Maybe one was a bit disappointed at Jimi Hendrix. Especially during the later show, the audience gave a cold appreciation and Jimmy and his band left without an encore. The first set went down well with the young audience, and during the intermission, Jimmy said he was satisfied. I like the Swedes. They sit still and listen to my music, and I think they understand it. There were no riots, not trouble, as for instance when the Rolling Stones were in Örebro, and there were no hysterical girls trying to rush the stage when Jimmy performed. Jimmy's stage work was not top rank, and that he doesn't deliberately try to be sexy we cannot believe. September 10th, Stora Salen, Akademiska Föreningen, Lund, Sweden. Performing 2 shows. September 11th, Stora Salen, Gröna Lund, Tivoli Gardens, Stockholm for 2 shows, and radio interview with Leif H. Andersson. The following is an account of the first concert, while no information is available in relation to the second performance. The concert opens with Foxy Lady, whose Experience delivers a good version. The dull energy, the heavy but relaxed tempo are very present. The central solo is largely inspired by that of the studio version. Jimmy dedicates Burning of the Midnight Lamp to Eva, clearly touched by the fact that she sent him flowers. It was with her that he conceived his only son, James Daniel Sundqvist. This guitar is so out of tune, he then explains. This version is notable for the absence of a large part of the instrumentation of the original version. With Fire, the group returns to the repertoire of Are You Experienced? The interpretation is effective, close to the studio version without however reaching its level. Noel Redding announces that the group will cover an old blues song now, a Muddy Waters song. Jimmy specifies that Mitch will play a drum solo and calls the composition Catfish Blues and Not Experiencing the Blues. Once again, Catfish Blues is the best moment of the concert. Jimmy quite simply creates the future of blues, while drawing on its deepest roots. The central solo, lasting about a minute, is splendid. Jimmy resumes with Wah Wah for the finale. Great moment. To a spectator who asks him to play Hey You, Jimmy replies that he does not know the words to this title, but that they will try to play Hey Joe. He then explains that when playing outside, it is difficult to keep the guitar in tune, insisting that it is very cold. I would like to do Hey Joe for you and Eva. Eva is clearly a good muse. It's a very good version. The central solo is of a decent level, although played with the teeth. And the second solo is certainly very visual too, which does not exclude Jimmy's outbursts. He plays 2 incredible shots. Jimmy explains that they still have time to make a song, and it is of course Purple Haze, which he begins with a noisy introduction in line with that of Wild Thing version Monterey. He uses the same plan, mixing vibrato and legato playing, which only he knew how to do at the time. After 2 energetic verses, Jimi launches into a solo modeled on that of the studio version, followed by a few short developments. However, there is one vibrato too many. It is badly out of tune when he takes up the last verse. It ends with an apocalyptic ending, impressive at first, but which falls apart at the end. The version of Catfish Blues indeed follows the framework of the Scandinavian concerts of 1967, with a drum solo from Mitch. We clearly guess that the title will find its culmination a few months later on Electric Ladyland with Voodoo Child. However, it is already the highlight of the concert, as Red House would become a few months later. The verses are sung very well by Jimi, who pushes his voice a little more than usual. It is interesting to note that at the end of the central solo, Jimi develops thematic elements present on other versions of this Scandinavian tour, therefore taking advantage of his previous improvisations to construct his speech, which many jazzmen do. At the end of the track, Jimi retunes himself and specifies that it's time for tune-up time, an essential moment in his program. However, Jimi is very out of tune, and he encounters difficulties. To fill it in, he jokes a little. "We pay very close attention to your ears. That's why we play so loud." The group then plays Fire, reconnecting with the feeling of the first two titles. Energy and efficiency are there. Noel announces that they are going to play one of their singles, The Wind Cries Mary. Jimi complains about his old strings before starting the piece. The fact is that it is not fair, and that he limits himself to the minimum service during the verses. In these conditions, the version is correct, but not unforgettable. Jimi therefore takes the time to retune and announces that they are going to play a top 40 R&B song. Mercy, Mercy. It's a song by Don Covey where Jimi acts as a sideman on the version original. Don Covey and the Good Timers, Mercy, Mercy, Can't Stay Away, 1964. This is the last of the two documented versions of this title played by The Experience, and it is unfortunately very short. The leads blow while the group is performing it. Too bad. It started off on a good basis, followed by a superb version of Manic Depression, largely modeled on the version of Are You Experienced? However, it's a version to know. There aren't that many, because Jimi brilliantly recreates the incredible climate of the central solo, and we are already at the last title. But what a title. The Experience indeed delivers a supercharged version of Purple Haze, where the energy developed transcends the few imperfections encountered here and there. After a short, noisy introduction, Jimi sings the first two verses perfectly, before launching into a superb solo, revisiting that of the studio version before performing brilliant developments. The last verse is no less strong, followed by a solo where Jimi pleases himself before pleasing his audience by ending the concert with his teeth. September 12th, Stjärnskenen, LISEBERGs Nöjespark, Gothenburg, Sweden. 2 shows. Jimi is interviewed by Gösta HANSSON for Göteborg Tidningen, published September 13th. While staying at the Park Avenue Hotel in Gothenburg, The Experience is asked to leave, not because of any problems, but because of their appearance. Princess Alexandra was due to arrive. To ensure no diplomatic fallout, Sir Archibald Ross, the British ambassador to Sweden, invites the group to the pub, where they are generally out of sight of the princess's entrance hall. Later that day, the group returns to London. September 13th. After completing the last performance of the Swedish concert, the Jimi Hendrix Experience returns to their place of residence, the posh Park Avenue Hotel in London. The following morning, the 13th of September, the group are awoken by room service. CATHERINA, then 21 years old, recalled, "I was working as a maid at the Park Avenue Hotel doing room service. There was a list on the wall of my floor which had Jimmy's name on it, so he was one of the guests I was supposed to attend to. I knew who he was, as Hey Joe was a big hit in Sweden. He had ordered breakfast through the reception. When his tray came up in the small elevator, I went to serve him his breakfast. When I entered the room, Jimi was already dressed and sitting on the bed. I don't remember if he said something more than thanks when he got his tray, but I remember he was looking at me in the corridor as I was walking away. It was that classic scene, where the man is looking at the girl walking away, hoping she will return his look. I did. Our eyes locked, and we both smiled. Mitch and Noel shared a double room, and when I brought them their breakfast, they were still in bed. One of them pulled back the sheets and said something childish, like, "Come and jump into our bed." They were making fun, like two small boys. When I got back later to get the trays, Jimi was standing in the doorway waiting for me. He looked at me, both of us a little shy, and he started talking to me. About the weather, I don't know. He gave me a slip of paper with his London address, 43 Upper Berkeley Street, London, W1. He asked me if I wanted to write to him. I did after some time, but I got no reply. This detail has only come to light and been verified recently, thanks to the diligent efforts of journalist and Hendrix researcher Ben Valkhoff. This is, he explains it. Our story begins in Switzerland. Marcel Aby, frontman of Hendrix tribute band More Experience and owner of the website monsterconcert.blogspot.com, told me in October of 2019 that a woman from Gothenburg called Katharina had contacted him. She told him she was the girl standing next to Jimi in one of the photos on his website, taken outside the HANSSON in Zurich on the 31st of May 1968. Presumably, she was the famous Katharina Jimi was in love with in 1968. I got in touch with her immediately. After 50 years of staying out of the limelight, she agreed to share her memories. More on that later. September 15th, Bluesville Club 67, the Manor House, London. Jam with Eric Burden and the New Animals. September 16th, Europa Hotel. Jimi receives the Top World Musician Trophy from the hands of Jimmy Savile, presenter at the BBC, disc jockey as they called it at the time, organized by Melody Maker. September 18th, London, Monday radio show. September 23rd, Jimi sees Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention at the Royal Albert Hall. September 24th, Jimi sees Traffic at the Savile Theatre. September 25th, rehearsals in London. Film and photo session, Royal Festival Hall, London, Liberal International Party's Guitar In, including photos with Liberal Party MP, Jeremy Thorpe. The following is an excerpt from New Musical Express, reporting the International Party's Guitar In. Has Jimi Hendrix joined the Liberal Party, or has Liberal leader Jeremy Thorpe joined the Jimi Hendrix Experience? The two leaders, one musical, the other political, got together backstage at London's Royal Festival Hall on Monday night, 24 September, after Hendrix had starred in a big guitar festival at the venue. Note, there is no truth in the rumour that Jimi Hendrix has been booked for a party political broadcast on behalf of the Liberal Party. Melody Maker reported the event this way. The guitar has often been misused and abused, but on Monday night, 5 guitarists showed 4 proper uses of the instrument at a Guitar In at the Royal Albert Hall. Then, an eruption took place on stage in the form of the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Hendrix is an amazing guitarist who does everything with the instrument, but make it walk off the stage by itself. I can honestly say, I have never seen anyone do so much on a guitar without using his hands. In the final number, Purple Haze, after using his famous teeth to extract hysteria-tinged sounds from his instrument, Hendrix finished up kneeling on his guitar, belting it with a drumstick. Financial Times, the 26th of September. In an article titled The Jimi Hendrix Experience, Anthony Thorncroft had this to say about Jimi. Hendrix, a 21-year-old American Negro, has now been in this country for a year, long enough to electrify the scene. Electrify is the only word, for the experience is supported on stage by 8 amplifiers and produces the most electronically refined sound in modern pop. In a turquoise velvet suit, Hendrix poured sound into the hall in one of the loudest and most sensuous performances ever seen there. With his guitar flicking out from every side of his body, he roared out 10 songs, culminating in a frenzied performance of his latest hit, Purple Haze. By this time he was playing the strings with his teeth, and at the end had to get the instrument down on the ground and roll on it. The showmanship is tremendous, but so is the noise, for Hendrix is a brilliant guitar player. Talking about the Guitar In event, Noel Redding noted, "We actually rehearsed for the Royal Festival Hall show featuring Bert Jansch, Paco Peña, Sebastian Jorgensen and Tim Walker. The acoustics were so good that we could speak on stage in a normal voice and be heard throughout the hall. We used one cabinet each, instead of our usual wall of sound, and we were still loud." Afterwards, Liberal MP Jeremy Thorpe, trailing 1 million photographers plus entourage, came backstage for a press chat. While Mitchell said of the event, "I remember we played this Guitar In. It was a sort of workshop sort of thing with mainly classical musicians, apart from us. I remember all those great shots of Jeremy Thorpe, having his hair teased by Hendrix and holding the Flying V guitar. Not our sort of crowd. I think Princess Margaret was there. A lot of people with fingers in ears. A nice gig for us to play nonetheless." Hendrix author John McDermott recorded, The event drew a decidedly upmarket London crowd, many of whom were not prepared for the sonic onslaught. Midway through the Experience's opening number, a woman sitting in the front decided that she had heard enough, got up and started to walk out. Hendrix spotted her and stopped playing to say, "Good night." The woman was mortified, and the audience delighted. Once again, Hendrix's delicate touch had perfectly handled the situation and turned it in his favor. The 26th of September, interviews and photo session for Newsweek. The 27th of September, recording at Rye Muse Sound Studios without Jimmy, she's so fine. The 29th of September, interviews and the David Frost Show, payment £60 and £29 respectively. That concludes episode 14 in this series. Stay tuned for the next installment, where we will examine October 1967 and completing the Axis album with some gigs in between. Please remember to check the channel's community tab and video information page, where you will find links to any related videos, performances, and stunning photographs from the period and any updates. Also, don't forget to subscribe for future content updates. By the way, if you have any stories or anecdotes to contribute, we would love to hear from you. Lastly, thank you so much for your wonderful comments and continuing support.